Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this workshop. So maybe just a quick presentation of the workshop. The workshop today is dedicated to the gender responsive design for rail stations and infrastructure. So the agenda is going to be the following. So first of all, we'll wait a few more minutes and welcome an introduction. Then there is going to be the presentation by Magdalena Olczak. Hopefully I pronounced it right, Magdalena.
Yes.
Is the manager at OECD, International Transport Forum. Then we're going to have a keynote on gender inclusive design. Why is it relevant for rail? By Sharon Francis, he's Associate Director for Transport Planning, Jacobs. Then we'll have some practical example from UIC members on gender inclusive design. So we'll have the Catalonia Railways, represented by Marina López, station manager from FGC. Then design principles of the Umeå station tunnel, which is going to be presented by Linda Gustafsson from Umeå commune in Sweden. We'll also have the security platform presentation on crime prevention through environmental design by Hendrik Vanderkimpen from Eurostar. The urban diversity design and the vision for HSR California by Janet Attarian from the Smith Group. Afterwards, some also related concepts about the connections to station and to intermodality, station surroundings, walking, cycling, also all the other transport connections as well. By Bronwen Thornton, who's the CEO of Walk 21, and then by Gonçal Cerda Beneito, PhD candidate at the Parisian Urban School of Urbanism, University of Gustave. And then we're gonna jump to a quick conclusion and discuss the next steps. So first of all, a quick presentation of this workshop and the Trying to Be Equal project. So Trying to Be Equal is a UIC project which brings together companies committed to gender mainstreaming in their operations to share knowledge and to enforce the awareness and engagement of UIC members and broader rail community about this topic. So Train to Be Equal currently works on a series of online workshops that will address the priority topics for members, for growing visibility and invite more UIC members to join the project. We're looking to build a robust network of companies that strengthen rail's commitment, engagement, and gender. And as I said previously, today's workshop will be dedicated to gender responsive design for railway stations and infrastructure. And basically the goal for today is to discover how the station design can help improve the experience for women using railway services, and especially the railway stations. So as you can see, different departments are going to be involved today in this workshop. There is this sustainability department represented by Lucy Anderton and Ji Hyun-ha. There's the security department represented by Marie-Hélène Bonneau and Laura Peterson. The talent and HR represented by Miriam Belhaj-Klop, and the passenger department and especially the station service, the station sector, which is represented by me actually. Maybe a quick overview of all the departments. You can see all the people that I've just mentioned, Lucy, me, Laura, and Miriam. You can also see their faces and the little icons on the screen. And I leave the floor to Lucy to present the UIC sustainability platform.
Thank you, Maria. So just to briefly let people know that it's really great to be working across all these different departments on this project, and Sustainability Platform is really proud to work on this space. We have a chair from Amtrak, who is a director of sustainability there, Cara Oldhauser, and we work on the platform on a whole range of different sustainability topics, including air quality, circular economy, energy and greenhouse gas emissions, noise and vibration, sustainable land use, so that's looking at biodiversity and land issues such as soil or water quality. And then we have a brand new topic around gender equality, and so moving into the social sustainability agenda to broaden our horizons on this. And you can see we're working on 3 main objectives. The first one is to advocate. So it's really important for us to be the voice of railways in global debates and global discussions, including talking about railways as a climate solution, and really getting involved in both social and environmental sustainability topics for railways. Secondly is to collaborate and really to convene the communities of interest around this, and we're a space where sustainability professionals within the rail industry can come together, share practice, share their challenges and issues, and work together. And thirdly, we work on practical solutions for the sustainability challenges that our members have for making their railways even more sustainable in the future. And so one of those particular solutions is indeed this project, the Train to Be Equal project that we work together on. I'll pass on to my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, do you want to continue?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Lucy. So hello, everyone. My name is Laura Peterson, and I work at the UIC Security Division, which works on behalf of the security platform. Our current chair is the Railway Protection Force of Indian Railways, and our co-chair is SNCF, the French Railways. At the security platform, we anticipate and collaborate on all different types of threats that can happen in the rail sector, ranging from recurrent threats like graffiti, pickpocketing, all the way through to more extreme events like terrorism. And the main objectives of the platform is really to bring the UIC members together to share experiences on how they have dealt with security events, and also to help them find the best solutions to address the different threats and adapt them to their individual situations. We also work to ensure coherence between different security policies and to help the development of international traffic. Furthermore, we elaborate recommendations regarding different security technologies, the human factors which are important in order to employ those different technologies, and as well as organizational factors. And of course, we're always looking to address new threats and develop innovative solutions, and we do this mainly by managing and participating in EU-funded projects dealing with rail security. One of the main topics that we have at the UIC Security Platform is, of course, the security of women and ensuring that women feel safe and secure in the rail environment, which is why we're very happy to participate in the Train to Be Equal project with our fellow UIC departments. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell. I pass it back to you, Maria. You're mute, Maria.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So the next one's going to be the UIC passenger department, and basically the UIC passenger department is reunites different groups dedicated to the passenger services. So there is the high-speed group, there is the intercities, there is the passenger services, the tourism and railway, but I'm going to be specifically speaking about the sector I'm overseeing, which is the station managers global group. So the group dedicated to stations, which is directly linked to today's main topic. So we have a chair, which is Mr. Fabrice Marinon, the Director of International Affairs from SNCF, the French Railways. And we have a vice chair, Paul Van Donning, who's strategist in Jarnusen, who's from Sweden. And the main objectives of the sector is basically where our goal is to function as an incubator for the new project related to stations. So we're looking forward to facilitate the exchanges of best practices between actors and experts, and more on the global level to enlarge the network of the station managers and to link all the experts of the railway station sector between them. Then we have the different working groups supporting the technical exchanges between experts. So some of the topics that we're working on and we will be working in 2024 is the station and urban design, facility management and operation, retail commercial affairs, small stations. We have also more particular topics that we're working on, including the, for example, station categorization, because the notion of the station, big station, middle-sized station, or small station, is not the same among all the countries. And also we'll look into the more specific topics like, for example, sustainability, intermodality, etc. And then basically another goal is to promote the train station as an intermodal and sustainable hub, meaning that the railway station is not just the station, just the stop for the railway services, but it's also the part of the city, the part of the neighborhood, and the part of the broader ecosystem. And we want to enlarge the scope of railway station activities to offer great value for customers, for cities, and basically for all the users, both passengers and non-passengers. Yeah, Miriam, maybe I can give the floor to you now.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Hi. So yes, so I will present to you the UIC Talent Expertise Development Unit and platform, but especially the platform. So the Talent Expertise Development Platform is dedicated to supporting UIC members in achieving a well-trained and motivated workforce, driving competitiveness and innovation in the rail sector. And our key objectives and initiatives are turning around 5 objectives. It's the first one is promoting excellence in railway training. So our platform organizes various events to celebrate and promote excellence in railway training. So by showcasing exemplary training initiatives and outstanding achievements, we inspire continuous improvement and the adoption of best practice models across the railways. The second objective is identifying new challenges for talent development and training on international level. So the objective is really to actively monitor emerging trends in the railway sector, taking into account new technologies and demographic challenges. And through research and data analysis, we aim to understand and address global talent development needs. The third one is highlighting research findings which bring innovation and have practical applications for the industry. So we are committed to identifying and disseminating relevant research findings in railway talent development by showcasing innovative research outcomes with practical applications to the railways. So we encourage ongoing innovation and advancement in talent development practices. The fourth one is enhancing collaboration among railway training centers. So we facilitate collaboration and knowledge exchange among railway training centers worldwide. So by fostering partnership and promoting cooperation, we aim to establish a network of excellence in railway training, enabling centers to learn from each other's best practices and collectively elevate railway standards. For example, our next event will be in Vienna at the kind invitation of ÖBB in April. So this is a way to exchange between training centers and to deal with the subjects related to talents. And the last one is, and the important one, is to attracting, developing, and retaining railway talents. And we do that while advocating for gender equality and fostering an inclusive environment. This is really an important topic. That's why we are all working together for on this. So our platform is working on updating our talent website. So we will soon have a new website, UIC talent websites, and this is to attract top talent to the railway sector. Can you click, please? There is something missing. Yes, thank you. So we do all these to achieve our main objectives. So we have 3 working groups. One is Education, Innovation and Research Group, which is led by DB. We have Railway Training Centers Network, which is led by Slovenian Railways, and Railway Talent, led by FS, and by Vito is with us today, I think. Yes. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Just before we go into the first keynote by Magdalena, is there any questions about the UIC different departments or platforms?
Nothing in the chat, Maria.
Yes. Well, in this case, Magdalena, I'm going to give you the rights to control the slides, sorry. And we can come. So Magdalena, just first of all, I'm going to say a few words about Magdalena and her background. So as I told before, Magdalena is the manager and gender coordinator in the International Transport Forum. Magdalena's got more than 20 years experience in international relations and policymaking. She's responsible for the ITF annual summit program and related institutional relations. She coordinates the ITF's work on gender and transport, including policy dialogue and consultations with the ITF stakeholders. She has been working in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development since 2004 on diverse policy portfolios, gender, consumer, competition policies, corporate social responsibility, environmental policies. And also, Magdalena is a part of the 2020 Remarkable Women in Transport, which is the initiative by the Transformative Urban Mobility. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the ITF, you can always visit their site, which we can fully put in comments for those who are interested. Magdalena, I'll leave you the floor.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thanks for this kind introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a great pleasure to join this discussion, and especially on the eve of the International Women's Day. I'm happy to introduce ITF's Gender Analysis Toolkit for Transport Policies. And next slide, please. It's me who should manage the slide. Sorry.
Yeah, Magdalena, normally you have the right to do that. Check it.
I'm just looking. Sorry. Is there any tool to share this? Sorry, I'm just looking.
I think you can just click on your keyboard. But if you prefer, I can control the slides as well. It's up to you.
I'm very sorry because it doesn't work. I'm clicking, but
yeah, no worries. I'm gonna share the slides.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No worries.
Thanks a lot. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Just 2 words about the International Transport Forum. We are an intergovernmental organization and a think tank that covers all transport policy modes. We are politically independent, and we have some administrative ties with the OECD, and ITF has 66 member countries. And just to finish this short introduction, we aim to foster a deeper understanding of the role of transport in economic growth, sustainability, and inclusion. And in this broader context, gender is one of our key priorities. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So we conduct research and analysis and engage in policy dialogue to better understand women's travel behavior. And we also address issues concerning women's participation in the transport workforce. So here on the slides, you see some snapshot of our publications. Next slide, please. And a few words about our recent work on gender that includes such topics as accessibility through equity lenses, the impact of automation on the transport workforce, the nexus of gender transport and climate change. And I would also like to mention our recent report, which is quite related to our discussion today on improving the quality of walking and cycling, and which highlights, which has a whole section on how violence, especially gender-based violence, is a constraint to everyday mobility in the cities. Next slide, please. Also, a few words before I present our gender toolkit. Let me start with the broader questions of why gender inclusion, diversity, and equity matter for transport. Transport systems are essential for people to access basic needs and services and social or other economic opportunities. So if gender inequalities exist in our societies, and they do exist, they will be reflected in our transport systems. Our research confirms that transport policies affect individuals differently due to factors such as income, age, gender, and all these factors are shaping travel behavior. In this context, the awareness among policymakers, decision makers in transport about these factors and how they relate to interface with this travel behavior defines whether transport system exacerbate or mitigate inequalities in transport, but also more broadly in our societies. So, for example, women spend significantly more time on unpaid care than men, and this leads to their different travel peak times and more trip chaining patterns. So transport systems often fail to accommodate these needs. And for example, in Ireland, this contributes to higher car dependency among women. Next slide, please. So accommodating the travel needs of women, which is half of the population, of the world's population, it is important, but in our view, it's only a starting point, and we need to better understand how some overlapping factors, such as age, disabilities, income, can be addressed together to make transport system more inclusive and more equitable. Next slide, please. And gender analysis is one, in our view, is one of key means to get there, to design, in order to design more sustainable and more inclusive policies. Gender analysis helps understand how transport policies affect genders differently. And it also identifies what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and how to narrow gender gaps. It requires, and this is at the heart of this gender analysis, gender disaggregated data. So with this in mind, and to support our member countries and other stakeholders in conducting gender analysis, we designed a gender toolkit. Just a few words about the gender toolkit. Next slide, please. The Gender Toolkit is an online tool. It is available on our website. And this tool consists of 3 main tools. So the first one is a gender checklist. So here is a list of 12 questions to help with initial evaluation, how the gender dimension is reflected in policy or given project. So this question cover different stages of the project or development of the policy, focusing on, for example, identifying who will be affected or how this group or individuals will be affected by given projects or policy. The second is understanding gender-specific transport needs and constraints and related opportunities, then involving stakeholders in a decision-making process. This checklist at the end, when you go through the 12 questions, at the end, and when you answer these questions, this checklist provides a gender equality score, which is a benchmark, and the score may vary from no gender equality to a high equality score. The second tool is the gender indicators. So this tool helps to select most relevant indicators for projects or policies. And it covers, for example, such indicators as accessibility of transport infrastructure and services, safety and security, affordability, employment, and education. And finally, the gender questionnaire is a template for designing surveys and data collection processes. So it's a more complex tool, helping to assess existing gender policies in transport. So, for example, we have used this tool, this questionnaire, to evaluate gender policies in our member countries. So that's very briefly about the tool. Next slide, please. And we have been now applying the toolkit at the ITF internally. We are taking this three broad approaches. So first, with the toolkit, we are trying and hopefully we are raising this awareness about among our staff about the importance of gender analysis. So we encourage a self-guided implementation by our colleagues, researcher and policy analysts. Then we collect the feedback on application of the toolkit. The second approach is light touch. We call it light touch approach when we have at the ITF a small internal task force, and we support our colleagues providing the resources so they also can implement the toolkit to their different projects. And finally, the in-depth approach is also guided by this small task force. And we provide the mapping and resources. We have the follow-up with discussions. And currently, for this year, we have 5 main projects where we will be implementing the toolkit. So I listed these projects here on this slide. So we very much hope you will take a look at our toolkit and trying to consider this in your work, in your projects. We would very much welcome your feedback, and this feedback could help us further improve the tool. It's a living tool, so we improve them as we are getting feedback from our different stakeholders, from countries, academia, and international organization, business community. So please help us to improve this as well. So I would be also very interested in learning about other tools organizations are using to incorporate a gender perspective in their projects, and I'm sure that I will learn more about this kind of initiatives today during our discussion on gender responsive design for stations and infrastructure. So thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to further discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. So maybe I can give the floor to the next speakers. So Sharon Francis and Angela López Garces. So just a quick introduction before. So Sharon is an associate director in transport planning and mobility solutions with Jacobs in the UK. She holds a master's in transport planning and engineering, and she's a chartered engineer with experience across multiple disciplines of transport planning. She specializes in business case development and assurance. Sharon is also a program manager collaborating with key public sector transport authorities such as Department for Transport, subnational transport bodies, and other local authority bodies in the UK. She's currently working on inclusive transport research with the Transport Studies Unit, University of Oxford, and is passionate about inclusion and diversity in transport. Then we have also Angela López Garces, who's an associate director with 19 years experience in a range of transport planning disciplines, including station modeling, transport modeling, demand forecasting, and cost-benefit analysis. She has been involved in major rail projects across the UK and internationally, including Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2, Crossrail and Crossrail 2 stations, London Overground Capacity Improvement Programme, Mersey Travel Rolling Stock Replacement Programme, NYCT Rolling Stock Upgrade, and Etihad Rail stations. Angela has a vast knowledge of different aspects relevant to station and train design, train platform interface, and performance risk. And we're very happy to have Sharon and Angela today with us. Sharon, Angela, do you want to, that I can try and give you the access to maneuver the presentation, or I can just, you can just tell me next slide as well. It's up to you.
Yes, I think we can tell you next slide.
Okay, perfect.
That works. Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Maria, for the introduction, and everyone who has joined online and is here with us. And also thank you to the International Union of Railways for organizing this event. We are delighted to be here with you to discuss gender inclusive design and why it is important for rail. Next slide, please. So there are so many ways we could have approached this topic, and this is our proposal. We thought it would be useful to start with some insights into the experience of women rail passengers. We will then go on to discussing the role of design on improving women's mobility and their experience on the railway, and then we will go through different station areas, exploring gender biases and how we can potentially address them. After conclusions and recommendations, we hope to have a little bit of time for questions and answers. And at this point, I would like to welcome my colleague, Sherin Francis. Welcome, Sherin, and over to you.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Maria, and everyone, and thank you for having us today. So if we can move on to the next slide, Maria, thank you. Lovely. So I think picking up on some of the points that Magdalena said in the previous presentation, I think we can start off with the overview of what are the insights of the experience that women face when accessing the railways. And we've just shown some of the key points here, which are some of those real life experiences from research, from data, which puts this to the forefront. And I think we already have a bit of a gist around what these current issues are and challenges are. You know, some interesting ones are, of course, men are more likely to use rail than women, and we need to understand why is this the case, and you know, what are the reasons why this happens. You know, over a third of the women who use the train or the underground in the UK, in London, are victims of sexual harassment or sexual offences. So there are different reasons why probably women do end up not using the railways as much. And you know, here's a very interesting graph which looks at, you know, men and females' responses to walking alone, which is very safe or unsafe, especially when looking after dark as well, which changes this. And what's really interesting here is women do find it unsafe after dark, but interestingly, even if it's a busy public space, rather than just if they're walking alone just by themselves as well, which shows how, you know, designing railways, designing the concourses, the places around crowding is also quite an important point. So some of the key important reasons why is, you know, women do find this difficult, maybe due to facilities, due to having less health and safety because of more accidents, availability and the quality of the infrastructure, the safety of being able to access this infrastructure. So there's just so many different ways that women do find using the rail system perhaps a bit more challenging than, let's say, other groups. And the main reason why is when making mobility decisions, women do highly value access to quality infrastructure, which makes a big impact on the way they travel. They choose different modes. They highly value access to mobility resources to help them make those choices. And then they are more often negatively impacted by things such as waiting times, crowding, and disruptions, as you can see from the evidence here. And also, if they were to have an alternative choice or a modal choice, it will be challenging again, because they are more likely to do different types of trips, different you know, chaining trips, as well as having not an infinite access to a lot of money and different other modes of travel as well. So if you go to the next slide, Maria, thank you. So we've looked at all of these insights, the experiences, and we've come to an understanding of where does design fit into all of this, and what is the role of design in improving women's mobility and experience of using the railways. So we have categorized this into two key bits. So what gender inclusive design cannot influence and what it can influence. So if we quickly go through the points that we think design cannot probably have as much of a higher influence, is the whole end-to-end experience. So we're looking at rail as a means of travel, not just with the railway rolling stock, but also how do you get to the station? How do you get from the station to your home and to destinations? the shape of the railway network, for instance, it's quite challenging to influence by just design, because this is where you start looking at the whole network, the origins and destinations, see where people want to travel, the different lines that is currently in place. Third, looking at affordability, a very big important point around affordability of rail journeys, because traditionally there are longer distance rail journeys which are more often more expensive than using the bus, for instance. Then capacity frequency challenges, as well as space constraints, which are all quite key things that perhaps are currently set in place that maybe design cannot have as much of an influence on. But positively, design does have a lot of influence on a number of different things, such as quality of the infrastructure, access to parking, access to the station, from the station, levels of crowding and perceived waiting times, security, which is one of the biggest things we'll be picking up soon, and looking at what happens not at these big busy peak periods. So looking at your non-commuter experience and the inclusion of groups such as children into the wider design of these stations, as well as of the railway itself. And just a couple of quick points of why we think inclusive design is very important. And for rail, of course, it leads to higher revenues, better benefits. It's a win-win. You're not only, if you do a gender inclusive design, you're not only helping women, but also other genders, people with mobility restrictions, children, elderly, and overall just improves passenger satisfaction of using the railways and being able to navigate through it. Maria, may I go to the next one, please? Thank you. Excellent. So as Angela did touch on initially, we've kind of structured this through to 3 different areas around station access, of course, what happens at the station in terms of platforms on the vehicles. So start off with station access. So one of the biggest things where inclusive design does have a big influence is around the multimodal interchange connectivity. And this is especially important because women do use a lot of buses, and buses are probably one of the biggest modes of transport that women do get on and get off. And the connectivity between buses and the train station and railway stations are quite key. So this would be connecting around the stop facilities, waiting areas, and even adequate signage, which was seen to be one of some of the key things that women did pick out as to, having clarity on what are the facilities available at a stop, because often bus timetables don't match with the train timetables. You have to end up waiting there for quite a bit of time to make that switch, but also signage to say where are the correct key bus stops, where are the key paths to the station, as well as understanding the next train. So some of the things as well to pick up is around accessibility, level of the access as well, especially with underpasses, because here in the UK, there are quite a lot of underpasses tied to the old Victorian railway network. So, you're being sent down this very, very unsafe paths that go to these stations because of the train lines often either being elevated or underground. And even convenient crossing facilities. So what some of the research we've done found that women and disabled groups of people are not very comfortable using zebra crossings, for instance, but they do prefer other types of crossings that are audible, with audible indicators, because it gives them a lot more confidence in being able to make that trip. Then looking at things such as underpass and the lighting, of course, which is one of the biggest things people pick up often, lighting and the level differences as well, because often women do have a lot of other things that they're carrying, which is quite challenging if you're going up and down multiple levels. Quickly picking up on one of the other things around station access is bike storage. So one of the key in trend things at the moment is around the mobility hubs and what do the hubs usually mean. And often there are a couple of projects that we're working on at the moment where if you look at what's currently existing, you're having station storage of bikes and other bits and pieces, often at the end, at the back, behind the station, somewhere not really at the forefront where it is safe, it is having good, secure storage as well as surveillance to protect, not just the bikes, but also protect people who come and use that facility. So here's an example on the top right, where here's a project where we're working on, where we're making sure that the bike storage that we are providing is right next to the entrance of the station, so that we can make sure that there's adequate lighting, CCTV, and other provisions being provided to ensure that it's a safe space. Another quick thing to pick up on station access is around the interchange facility penalty. And just quickly, Maria, before we go on to the next slide, if you mind going back to the previous one. Thank you. I think you've gone a couple of slides forward.
Apologies, which slide was that?
If you go back to the slides that you were at. Yes, that one. Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect.
Just one final point on this, Maria, before we move on, is understanding how we design these forecourt areas is quite important with a gender view in mind, because often women find the fact that you start putting shrubs, big landscaping, greenery, it's great, but also it starts creating a sense of, you're not sure what's behind there, who is standing behind there. It costs a lot of, anxiety around who and what is available at those key areas. So just a final point is on station access, it's quite important to integrate multiple modes and ensuring that the waiting times and the penalty of switching between these modes are kept in mind when we're designing these station forecourts as well. So I'll just pass on to Angela back to look at some of the other areas of the design. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherin, and thank you for sharing those best practice examples. I think many of the principles will also apply inside the stations. If we go to the next slide. So when we design stations, obviously what we want to do is to accommodate or provide enough capacity to accommodate all the passengers that are going to be using the railway. And we also want to achieve efficient movement to and from trains. In concourse areas in particular, there are some pressures on the space. Some of them are related to generating revenue, and for example, through retail and through advertising space. Other pressures come through protecting revenue for train operating companies, and we use automatic ticket gates for this, again, taking space from passengers. And this usually results in waiting areas that tend to be or could be crowded. As we have said in the introduction, women experience crowding a little bit different from men. And some of the gender biases that I observed on concourse areas are precisely related to the fact that they can be crowded. To the level of comforts or the level of tolerance to crowdings, we need to also add that navigating the space and wayfinding in crowded conditions is more challenging for shorter people. So again, this is something that a gender bias that we are perpetuating to our designs. But squeezing people on confined waiting areas, we might be marginally impacting women more negatively. The other group of biases that I would like to highlight in this type of areas relate to circulation areas, specifically stairs and escalators. And again, there is these spaces work better for stronger people that don't have any type of mobility restriction, being this luggage, walking with children or shopping, etc. What are we doing as an industry, or what can we do about it? One of the key things that I think we do quite well is to identify the problem and then provide some sort of safety campaign or education to the vulnerable users so they can teach themselves how to navigate the space safely. And you have an example there from Network Rail, trying to give people wearing high heels some hints and tips on how to navigate the station. But I think as designers, we can do much more. We have these beautiful tools, which are design tools that we use for design, simulation of stations. And this gives us a great insight into how a space is used under various designs. We can optimize the designs to alleviate congestion. This is going to always work better for women. And it gives us also opportunity to look at those space utilization and utilize the space more cleverly. So there is an opportunity there to use these tools to build not only an efficient design, but a gender inclusive design. Other things are around step-free access routes. Sometimes they are an afterthought in the design and they end up being very long and convoluted. Again, this does not help vulnerable users, including women. And one last final thought on this type of areas, that a child-friendly design could end up being a women-friendly design. When we look at the proportions of women using rail, women and men using rail, we see that proportions are very equal until around 30-year-old, which in Europe is the childbearing age. And from this point onwards, women start using the railway much less and it never fully recovers. So again, there might be a link in there in between, you know, designing for children and making it work for women in that sense. Next slide, please. Moving quickly on through platforms and platform train interface, Sherin has already mentioned how valuable could be to have an open space without hidden corners, where people have direct line sights. But I think, and this is very important, that we try to achieve this with our designs. I think the challenge in this space is, and perhaps a little bit less obvious, is around boarding and alighting and the platform train interface. Again, there are statistics out there that show that women have more accidents than men during boarding and alighting. Why is this? These are, first of all, boarding and alighting takes place during a very reduced time. It's only a few seconds to undertake this activity. Usually crowded spaces, which we have said already, they are a little bit more difficult for women to navigate. And we also have the platform, a gap between the train and the platform. So what can we do as designers? Of course, we can warn the user to take care of themselves, another poster there, safety campaign, but there is other things we can do. And I think we can explore all options to alleviate congestion, to organize a little bit the flows around boarding and alighting. You have an example there of platform markings, hugely unpopular, by the way, here in the UK, but apart from being a nuisance, could do something for women, could support women mobility in this space. And then anything we can do to minimize the gap between train and the platform is also something that could work for women. Next slide. Moving into vehicles, I would like to highlight a couple of things. One is around inclusive seating, and I think we have seen several examples of several examples of ideas about inclusive seating or providing wider spaces inside trains. Those potentially are not successful because seated capacity or other capacity metrics need to be met, other capacity requirements need to be met. So as designers, perhaps we can challenge that a little bit. You know, the metrics we use to, or the criteria we use to say if a rolling stock is successful or not successful. There is also biases created that are related to the ergonomics of trains. And these are things like grab handles, poles. Where do we put the luggage? Is it an overhead luggage rack? It's going to be more difficult for women to negotiate. And the other main point is around onboard visual travel information. It's very important that our trains have a provision of high quality information about their journeys. Just a last thought that our train designs maximize capacity again, and they might work really well during commuter peak, but what happens at other times of the day? And perhaps one last thought for designers would be, can we add some flexibility to the design so that it also works for different purpose, non-commuting purposes, and it also works for different times of the day? For example, what happens in the last train with sexual harassment, is at its height. Could we perhaps use women-only carriages then, or can we provide a design that supports that flexibility? And before going into questions and answers, I will invite Sherin back to go through the conclusions.
Thank you, Angela. Maria, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I think that was a bit of a whirlwind tour around some of the key areas we think there are design currently having biases around gender and what we can probably start looking at when designing these things going forward. So we understand also that there are some current design practices and guidance which does have a chance to introduce and perpetuate these biases in the railway. And it's, you know, as you can see, we've gone through those different stages. It's presented in all aspects of station design, right when we arrive to the station to get on the train and go on to the journey. And then including gender inclusive design is, we believe, an excellent way of attracting women into the railway, improving their experiences. Again, as we said, a win-win situation, which leads to better revenues, you know, better demand using the network. And then using that whole end-to-end journey approach is quite essential for women, because we can see that women do use multiple modes and do switch between modes, which means that the whole travel experience is quite essential for women when they do go about their journeys. And then, of course, one of the key things here is around monitoring and evaluation, because often there are loads of things that could work, that couldn't work, but the key component here is to ensure that there's sufficient monitoring and evaluation done to understand what works best for different groups. And there are currently a lot of design tools that are present, and like Angela touched on, things around station design, crowding. It is a key essential point to start understanding what these tools can be used for, and if we are utilizing the best of these tools to help provide solutions that can start focusing on inclusivity and better outcomes for women as well as other groups. So those were the key conclusions of our presentation, and as Angela mentioned, Maria, will hand it back over to you for some questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Sherin. Are there any questions for Magdalena, Sherin, or Angela in the audience? Do not be shy if you have any.
The hand up, Maria.
So, in case there are no questions, I have a question.
Maria, there's a hand up. Sorry, there was a hand up, I think, from Julia.
Yeah, yes, Julia. Go ahead.
Hello, thanks so much for the presentation. As you were speaking about seating capacity, crowdedness, and boarding times being quite short, I was wondering, how do you see the role of frequency of trains to maybe alleviate some of these issues?
Thank you for the question, Julia. So yes, at the moment, the railway industry, I think they have this big dilemma is between achieving high frequency, and to achieve high frequency, you need a very short dwell time, a very, very short boarding and alighting time. And the other, and this comes a little bit in conflict with achieving a high capacity and, you know, getting a lot of people through. So it's always a fine trade-off between frequency and capacity. Now, reducing the frequency could be a tool. This would potentially lead to more boarding and alighting time, but it also could be detrimental for women which identify they have higher perceived waiting times, and also it has been identified they feel anxiety while waiting for their trains. So I think overall reducing frequency is perhaps not the best solution out there, but definitely if we could achieve longer boarding and alighting times, that I think that could help, in addition to the points I've mentioned earlier.
Thanks a lot.
I see that there is another question in the chat. So Heather Allen asked whether there are any examples where the design has to be an improvement, as they seem like good ideas, but do we know how they work? How do they work this? Heather, I don't know if you can maybe precise your question?
Sure. Yes. So yes, the idea is, yeah, they're all good ideas. But do we actually have any documented evidence that they specifically do help women? Do they actually improve the numbers of women passengers? You know, I'm sure that across the board they probably improve, but it's quite difficult to see this uniquely through a gender lens. Is that clearer?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, Maria, to just pick that up. So thank you, Heather, for the question. I think it's a very valid question. It touches on the point we made at the end around monitoring and evaluation, isn't it? That is the key thing. So just quickly on some of the examples we've been showing. So some of these are actually being implemented, while some have been implemented, and I've done a lot of monitoring and evaluation research and work as part of my job, and part of that does work. Is the short answer. So things like improved types of crossing, where do bike storages go at stations, do have an impact in the way women do perceive where if it's safe for them to access their modes as well as switch between modes as well. And I think buses are one of the biggest ones. So I'm currently doing a research work on bus accessibility, and frequency and access at the stops have been one of the biggest responses that have come back in terms of where women do want to see changes. So I'll cover those bits and I'll just hand over to Angela if there were anything else, Angela, you wanted to add in.
Perhaps just saying that, yes, it is a good point, Heather, and there is limited evidence of what exactly all those measures achieve or do not achieve. But if we look at research and look at what matters to women, then we need to kind of accept that if we influence or we improve what matters to women, this will result on an enhanced experience, a better health and well-being for them, and potentially more users into the railway. If we could design a railway that worked for women and we could bring them into this mode of transport more, I think that the way to do this is by influencing things that matter to them. So yes, not a lot of data there, but I guess the data pool needs to be created through monitoring and evaluation, as Sherin said.
Thank you, Angela. I would like actually to readdress the question to Magdalena as well. So I see that there are questions about before and after studies, comparing the measures or the KPIs for monitoring and evaluating these initiatives that the design stations can implement. Magdalena, do you think that this ITF gender analysis toolkit that you just presented can actually serve as a basis for such KPIs?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Thank you for these questions. Yes, indeed, because we designed the school toolkit with options that it serves to, it is applicable to all modes of transport. And notably in this case, for example, the indicators, the list of indicators that we are providing. So there are a number of indicators that we suggest that to be used in further analysis, like on accessibility, when one of the indicators is how family friendly, how gender friendly are the for example the stations. The other indicator is related to infrastructure. So how infrastructure, the safety of the infrastructure and perception of safety. So this kind of improvement, like lighting on other aspects that were just presented. So this kind of toolkit provides this kind of indicators that could be used for in this case, and also overall checking list. This 12 questions that we have as a checklist. That could be first starting point to evaluate whether the space is gender friendly and design is gender friendly. So absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much. I see that we were running out of time, so I would suggest to maybe go into another section. But if you have any more further questions for Magdalena, Sharon, or Angela, do not hesitate to put them in the chat and we can transfer them after the workshop. And if, yeah, do not hesitate to do that. So the next chapter of our workshop today is about the challenges that are posed by the gender data gap and how to address them. This chapter is going to be presented by some of the UIC members and is going to be dedicated to some concrete cases. So first presenter is Marina López from FGC, the Catalonia Railways. So Marina López is the manager of I'm sorry if I pronounce it badly, Llobregat Anoia line station since 2019. She joined the FGC in 2008 and worked in several operational positions in the Cremallera de Montserrat Metropolitan Lines and Integrated Command Center. She also held the position of Station Group Supervisor and is accredited as directive by the ODE. She's coordinating the major emergency and catastrophe by the Institute of Public Security of Catalonia. She's also was trained in various operational specialties in railway sectors such as customer service, attention to diversity, business manager, and team leadership. And Marina, maybe I can leave the floor to you.
Hi, no, I can say next slide. No problem. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I will explain a gender audit recommendation that we have in 2019. It is about security perception and recommendation for women in transport. You can pass the slide, please. I'm from FGC. We are a railway company based in Barcelona and owned by Catalan government, and we manage a railway infrastructure and also mountain resorts. Next slide, please. No, this one. Thank you. We did this security audit with gender perspective. It consisted in observations at 4 stations. It was 62 hours of observation, including weekdays and weekends, and also all times of the day, morning, afternoon, and night. And also surroundings and inside the stations. From this observation, we get recommendations based on 6 principles that I will explain now. Please, next slide. The first principle is about a signage environment. It is about know where you are and know where you go. So here we include improvement of intermodal signaling inside the stations and outside the stations, and also where do you have bike parks, including TV information panels about other companies will have their transport, so you can know, and not only about FGC, you can know all the surroundings information. Here we change reserved seat pictograms for a non-sexist and inclusive ones. All the time we have the man was with her leg or her arm broken, and now is the woman, and the man carried the baby. And also the old man is a man and not a woman. So it is a non-sexist way to inform what are the research seats. Also, we had a problem with the double door PRM doors, and people didn't know how to use it. So in this audit, they recommend us to improve the instructions of yours in order to know when it closes, how you do to open it without anxiety. And improvement of area maps and also signaling the routing adapt access. So if you are with a baby carriage, you know exactly where you have to go to take the lift, or where you have the adapted access in the train, so you can achieve your destiny without dupes. So you have a safer perception. Also, we change the panels, the information panels, and increase the letters and visibility, so you can be you can see it from long distance. Please, next. Okay, the second principle is about visible environment. It's about see and be seen. So to achieve this, we need open spaces with high visibility, and you can see all the people in the station, all the equipment, all the access and exits. And to achieve this, we need transparent materials, avoid obstacles, and reduce corners. If you cannot do this, you can put mirrors so you can see other places of the station. Also, it's about improving the lighting and also achieving homogeneous illumination. Not only inside the station, you have to take care about the surroundings. And this audit says us that our commercial advertising surfaces were not correct, and we had to reduce it. If you see the photo, in the lift, we usually use all the front of the lift, and now we only use the middle up. So if you are inside the lift, you can watch outside what's going on. So you are safer to go out of this lift. Also in the stairs, you can see in the photo down. If you look, it's all about how you can take your decision. If I have transparent material and I'm in the hall and I see in our information panel that my train will pass in 10 minutes, if I'm in the hall and I see that in the platform are only a group of men, I can choose if I stay in the hall and then go down, or I can choose stay in the platform. But it's my decision, so it would be safer for me in base at information that I have. Next slide, please. The third point is about a guarded environment. About formal and informal wording, and about how I can access to help or be able to escape if I'm not comfortable. The first point was our information points weren't visible enough, so we have a new design. So in all points of the station, you can see them now. Also, it's good to promote informal wording, maybe like in this photo with a bar or with a commercial local. And also, it's important to clearly signal the point of where I can have formal help or formal information. And from this audit, we know that it's better to train staff with gender perspective, also the security words, because always we train our staff, but security words were not so sensitive to this point, and now we have trained them, and now they are better. And the other thing is about giving advertising space to campaigns against gender violence. So as two women can know we are sensitive about this point. Next slide, please. The next point is about equipment. If you have more equipment, more accessible and clean and well maintained, it increases users. And if it increases users, it increases safety perception for women. For example, we have put auto opening button in the water close, so they are autonomous to enter or this site, and is fully equipped and inclusive, unisex. It's not only for women to change the baby, all society can change the baby. So it's important to put this in the station to put in the mind of the society that not is only for women. Also double height handrails, so all people can use them. And an important thing that we didn't mind about before is that benches, it would be better if they have 2 armchairs, so all people can stand up easily and autonomous. And there are lots of all women alone in public transport, so they are more safer if they can get up faster. Next slide, please. And 2 last ones are together because both are from the same importance, or they are together always. It's about listen and be heard. If I go in a crowded place or place with more people, not only me, if I need something, I will be listened. I will be here. So promote vital spaces with people and space appropriation. It would increment the vitality, and it would increment the access to help. So it would increment the safety perception of women. And there are some examples about, this is Gracia Station. It have a piano in the station. So now all time there is someone playing the piano. So if somebody needs help, maybe there will be someone playing this piano, so it could help people. And we have expositions in the hall of the stations. And also another important thing is to giving advertising space to civic awareness campaigns. So it will promote special space care and space appropriation. So more vitality, more people, more help, more safety perception. Next slide, please. And as a conclusion, the interrelationship and combination of these 6 principles will help to increase women's perception of safety. And also improving this will improve accessibility, daily activities, people care, and more diversity in public transport. And for my part, it's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marina. So the next up is Linda. So Linda Gustafsson serves the Gender Equality Committee at the City Council of Umeå and is an expert for the municipality on gender equality. She has coordinated several national projects and been project leader for the international project Gender Landscape, focusing on holistic and tailor-made methods in gender equality work in European cities. She was working with gender equality, especially focusing on urban planning and public spaces for more than 15 years, sorry. Linda, I think I'm gonna leave the floor to you now. Do you wanna, you can just tell me next and I'm gonna.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. You can take the next slide straight away, I think. So my name is Linda Gustafsson. I work for the city of Umeå in the north of Sweden, and I'm going to show you 2 examples of infrastructure in public space. So in the city of Umeå, that is in relation to railway. I wanted to start with this one though, since I work for the municipality, and from the standpoint of the city, these are the development strategies for the city of Umeå, and one of them up in the left corner says that everyone should take part, and then that continues gender equality should be part of all urban planning. So that's also one of the sort of starting points when working with gender equality in relation to urban planning and public space. I think that I will dive straight into the practical examples, so you can take the next slide. So this is the Umeå Eastern Railway Station. This was built in 2010. And I also then want to mention that the data sets that are mainly focusing on when it comes to some of the data sets that we focus on when we talk about public space, station buildings, in this case, in the city of Umeå, we have data sets on the gender segregated labor market, we have travel habit surveys, but then also, of course, data on feelings of unsafety in public space. And this Umeå Eastern Railway Station, the building that you see behind it, the white one, that's the hospital area in the city of Umeå. So it's very close to the hospital. We know that the hospital is a workplace that employs a large amount of women. And we know that in Umeå that women travel more sustainable than men, so they use public transportation, and they also ride their bikes and walk to quite a high extent. When this was to be built, there was dialogue, and I think that dialogue and citizen participation in some way is key in talking also about these types of constructions and buildings. So there was dialogue with the employees of the hospital, so nurses, for example, in what kind of station building that would possibly improve feelings of safety when using it, because we know also in a workplace like a hospital never stops. It is 24 hours open, and that means also that you work all hours of the day, so you leave and you arrive all hours of the day. And what was picked up on in the dialogue was, for example, having overview, being able to see when you enter into the station building, being able to, what we heard earlier in this presentation, also orient yourself quite easily where you're supposed to go in order. This is not a huge station, but being able to orient yourself quite quickly. You can also see on the outside that this entire station, it's glass. And that's also, we're sitting in the north of Sweden. Parts of the year it's quite dark. That means like allowing for as much daylight as possible. We know that that can also increase feelings of safety. So you can take the next slide, please, where you will see an image of, you see the stairs in the back of the photo. That's where you enter into the station. And I also wanted to highlight the artwork, that the artwork is also here important to create this feeling of a place being in some way inhabited, because we've heard about crowding and so on, but in a city like Umeå, it might not be crowding. It might be that it's quite that the place might feel quite deserted, that not a lot of people are actually moving through it. And I think that this is the reality also in cities of the size of Umeå. So having, for example, artwork and in being sort of present in the station, I think also improves this feeling that something is sort of going on. So that was my first example, and we can move on to the next one, which is the passage under the Umeå Central Railway Station. This was then commissioned by the City of Umeå together with the Swedish Transport Administration Agency, and this was built in 2012. And when this was to be built, there was all sort of stakeholders involved in this process. They did workshops together when they did a study visit where they walked through different tunnels, like what makes it feel more safe, what makes it feel less safe, what makes it feel more accessible, less accessible. So the actual sort of building the passage or the tunnel in this case, but also the surrounding areas, greenery, lighting, housing, how close or far away are they, and how does that make us feel? So this was also, we also received some funding also here from the Swedish National Board of Housing, Building and Planning to sort of improve our methods for working with gender equality in this type of construction. And we can go to the next slide to showcase the sort of what actually was made then or integrated into the building process after this, the sort of workshop and common learning between the different stakeholders. And I think if you click one more time. Yes, good. So this is then one of the things is that the lighting in the roof, which is artificial lighting, there was an ambition to make it resemble daylight as much as possible. That's also on the right, you can see an exit that's in the middle of the tunnel. And that's also for them to allow daylight, but also to have an extra exit. This wasn't planned from the beginning. This was added when working actively with gender equality, so that you would have a way out of the passage if it started to feel, for some reason, unsafe. The passage is quite broad. But it's not as or wide, but it's not as wide as you might think it is. I think it's 9 or 10 meters. And there are designated lines for bikers and walkers, and all the corners in this passage all the corners are rounded, so there are no sharp corners in the passages. And that's also to not get the feeling that someone might be hiding or that you don't have full visibility when you go through it. There are no pillars in the middle, for example. And I think this is important to remember when working with gender equality in these types of constructions, that if it's also the choices not made, that you decide not to have pillars, that you decide not to have something. It's not only what's added, it's what's not added, so to say. and then the roof extends no further than so that you have overview. So when you enter into the passage from one side, you can see all the way to the other side where the passage so you never have to sort of turn a corner and not know what's there, and it's the same from both sides. But then another thing, which is important, I think, in this particular example, if you go to the next slide, that's the artwork in the passage. So it's an artwork, and you saw some of it on the previous slide where you saw a quote where it says "lev" and an exclamation point, and that's means live. So that's the Swedish word for live, and that's also part of the artwork, and it's 170 meters long glass artwork, and it's all quotes from quotes also picked by the citizens of Umeå from an author called Sara Lidman, who is from the county of Västerbotten, which Umeå is in, and also the artwork, which is also both light and sound and quotes, and the quotes were picked by citizens of Umeå, picking their favorite quotes also from her books and voting, and having this sort of interaction and having this participation, I think also important, because it's this feeling of belonging, feeling like this is a passage or a tunnel that belongs to the citizens of Umeå, that have been part in sort of creating it. So, and also that you have the company of another woman, even though she's not in a physical form, she's in the form of quotes, and her voice that you can listen to, I think also increases the feeling of safety when you pass through it. So in conclusion, I think cooperation is key in both of these projects. Dialogue is also key, but then this combination between the technical, the infrastructure, the physical structure, but then also combining them, we're having that in tandem with an understanding of different living conditions, and the living conditions in the place that you're actually working in our case, in our city, I think is key to reach good results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. So the next one, just a kind reminder that if you have any questions, we're going to have a sessions for the questions in the end of this session. Do not hesitate to put them directly in the chat, so you would not forget them afterwards. So the next one is going to be a presentation by Janet Attarian from the California High-Speed Rail Authority. So Janet is a principal at Smith Group and has 30 years of experience with a focus on inclusive neighborhood development, urban mobility, and ecological infrastructure. So in her leadership role as senior mobility strategist, she helps craft Smith Group's vision for transportation focused on people and planet. She now advises the California High-Speed Rail Authority. She combines her technical expertise and innovative thinking with the commitment to inclusive, equitable development and public engagement to implement policy and design that improves quality of life for everyone. Prior to this, Janet was the complete streets and sustainability director for the Chicago Department of Transportation, where she led the city's implementation of place-based multimodal street design. After that, she was the deputy director for the Detroit Planning and Development Department. Janet, maybe I can leave the floor to you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Maria. I'm really delighted to be here today and to talk with everyone. If you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about California's high-speed rail initiative. It's the first public high-speed rail system to be built in the United States. So you may or may not have a lot of familiarity with it. It's over 494 miles or almost 800 kilometers are currently being designed. It's our phase one connecting San Francisco all the way down to Los Angeles, Anaheim. It's pretty much a brand new system from end to end. We have a couple of stations that have partially been built, and there's some existing track that's being leveraged, but most of it will be all new stations and all new track. And what you can see here too from this map is we're obviously connecting those big population centers of San Francisco and LA, but we are going through what is called the Central Valley in California, which has a very different set of demographics and opportunities and challenges than our more populated areas around the Bay Area and Los Angeles. Next slide. So where are we focused today? There are efforts going on along the entire corridor, but a lot of our work is actively happening in the Central Valley, and to build these first 119 miles or 191 kilometers. This work is really under construction, with lots of the viaduct itself being built, but we are also actively in the process of designing the 4 major stations in the Central Valley: Merced and Fresno, Kings Tulare, and Bakersfield. Next slide. So obviously in doing all of this work, we are producing a lot of jobs both in the construction and design industry right now. This is really important because, and one of the reasons that the project is starting in the Central Valley is because we wanted to make sure that this project was improving the lives of Californians and providing jobs to the community. And there has been a big focus on hiring local folks, particularly hiring small businesses. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a bit, and how that's affecting women in particular. And then, of course, there's a real emphasis on how this project will achieve California's overall sustainability goals. And there are some very aggressive sustainability goals on this project, which again, I'm going to talk a little bit how that translates into supporting women a little bit later. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we are starting with these the design of these 4 stations. There is definitely work going on in some of the stations outside of this area, but they are still a little ways off. We hope to have this first 171 miles up and running by 2030. So we are very much actively in the process of working on the design of these stations so they can get built in time for this section of the system to be up and running. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of dial in now on what are some of the things we're doing right now when we're in the planning and design stage of this whole entire system from scratch, which is a unique opportunity, and how we're really thinking about gender inclusive design right from the beginning, and how this kind of project can really improve the quality of life for women. So I already mentioned, and I'll talk a little bit more about, job opportunities. Obviously, how we're designing with gender inclusivity in mind, with specifics around the train and the stations themselves. And then also how we're thinking about the importance, we heard speakers talk about this earlier today, of not just the station, but the community that that station is in, and how these things come together. Next slide. So I hinted at this earlier. You can see from this map, it's showing again the line, and this comes out of this data comes out of the Well-Being Index of Women, which is a study that was done in California to sort of understand women issues in particular in California. And what you can see is that Central Valley, where you see all that red, those are all the counties that the stations are going through in the Central Valley. And you can see that the outcomes for women are much different than they are in the 2 sort of coastal areas and larger population centers of the greater San Francisco and greater Los Angeles areas. And so I think it's really important that the project is starting in the Valley and addressing these issues first, but it also, these facts need to inform the way we are designing. We know that women in the Valley, and especially women of color, face persistent barriers that have been stubborn and been hard to overcome for generations. We know that they clearly do not do as well as their counterparts in other parts of the state, and we know that there is a good chunk of them living in poverty. Next slide. So where does the authority start? Well, economics is really important, right? And so jobs is therefore really important. And how can the billions and billions of dollars that are going into creating this new system actually have an impact on women's lives even before the system is up and running? So it starts at home. The High-Speed Rail Authority itself has won international recognition because of its employment practices. Over half of its workforce is female, and most of its executive team is also female, which is always a great thing. But it also translates into who they're hiring and how they're incentivizing it. So contracts require a 30% small business requirement. This is really important. These are small firms across the state, often owned by minority and women, although not exclusively, and that is required for design, it's required for construction. And then there are additional goals around disadvantaged businesses, which do include women businesses, and veteran businesses, which also include women businesses. And you can see here from the statistics that not only is a total of 822 small businesses being engaged, but 147 of them, half of the disadvantaged businesses are women owned. And I know from our own team, where 50% of our team is women-owned small businesses, this really has made a difference, because to get these firms to be able to work on high-speed rail, they have to go through a lot of practices to really level up their business practices. And this makes them eligible not only for high-speed rail work, but a lot of additional work outside of high-speed rail. And it has been a really great experience for us personally. Next slide. So obviously, affordability and good options, you've heard all the other speakers talk about this, giving women choice, making those connections seamless, making them intuitive. How do we start thinking about this right from day one in the design process? So a lot of the good practices we all know about, creating multimodal hubs at the stations, really bringing a lot of different modes together. But there are certain things in our basis of design and our design criteria manual that really sort of address some of the issues that are specific to women that we've heard talked about today. So all of these modes need to be within a 5-minute walk of the entrances of the stations. So that proximity, looking at that passenger journey, and how that can be done intuitively, safely, and that it's very easy to do that trip chaining, which is really important to women. Next slide. So the other thing that I think is really important is, obviously, we are still in the design and planning stages of this system. And so the first part is hopefully will be open in around 2030. But there's a lot of efforts going on right now that are impacting riders and women in the system and in the state of California, even before the larger high-speed rail system is up and running. In the Valley, we are really working with all of the transit providers. And the high-speed rail is really becoming the new backbone for a real overhaul of California's public transit system, really bringing it up into the 21st century. And so we are, the authority is helping electrify bus fleets. There's new and revised train service that is being developed to tie into all these stations. Every station is getting some form of new transit hub. There's EV bus charging and vehicle charging that's being integrated throughout the system. And many of these projects are already underway or getting started and will be up and running before even high-speed rail. There's also some big efforts going on in the northern and southern piece, where electrifying existing track systems that high-speed rail will come in on, and also blockages that happen now, so that when high-speed rail comes on, the whole system can really be. And this has been really exciting, and I think something that a lot of people from the outside don't always understand, that when we say high-speed rail in California, it's so much more than just the high-speed rail train system. It's really a rethinking of public transit and getting to those seamless interconnections, which are so important to women. Next slide. So this translates, though, down into the trains and the stations themselves. So these are some mock-ups of the trains. Because it is a new system, we'll be able to go with the wider 11-foot plus or minus cars that are often seen in Asia and other places. And these are some mock-ups that have been done. This is a rail car dedicated to a play space and informal seating, places where parents can casually sit and let children move around and play in the space. So that idea of really family-friendly design in the train. We're also looking at a range of seat types. So some very private cubicles, to, you know, more typical seating. And then again, the width gives us the ability to create pods so that larger family groups can sit together. All these, having that range is really important of options to women, right? Whether they're a single woman alone who wants to maybe have a little bit of privacy, to maybe a woman traveling with a large family and really needing to be able to keep everyone close. So next slide. And then the designs of the stations themselves. So there's a lot of really key things that we're looking at. You can see that, you know, having our entrances very visible, making vertical circulation very visible in exterior stairs and escalators. When we're looking at platform designs, really minimizing intrusion, so there's clear sight lines. You can see who's on that platform. There aren't hidden corners. Wraparound services from creating retail forecourts and you know, multimodal connections. And in the case of the Fresno station, that sort of vertical circulation that you're seeing not only leads you to the station, but it is a continuous bridge across the station that actually connects communities that are separated by the railroad tracks. Again, really an important thing for women, that they don't have to go around a long way or under the underpasses to get from one side to the other. There's a well lit, well secure circulation path which everyone needs to move through, whether you're going into the station or just crossing over to the other side of the community. Next slide. So Smith Group did a study where we really tried to understand what people were looking for in gender inclusive restroom design, lactation facilities, and did a lot of work interviewing people, doing a lot of surveys to understand what they were looking for. And there were 4 key things that came up that we're working to apply not only to restroom design, but throughout the design. One is, and none of these are surprises. We've heard a lot of this earlier today, easy to find and navigate, right? It's got to be clear and super intuitive. And the layouts have to feel really welcoming. The ergonomic side, prioritizing the well-being and accessibility and the convenience, right? It goes beyond just, can I find it? But when I get there, are things arranged in a way that really supports the needs? And then the cultural aspect is really important. And how is it fostering a sense of belonging and respect? That really makes a difference when the design is telling you that you are respected. You're going to feel much more comfortable and feel much more welcomed. And then, of course, access and really preventing this creating spaces that feel exclusive, and really making sure we're focused on how we're providing safety. Next slide. So how does this this translate in what we're doing in terms of design? Well, certainly, how we are looking at bathroom design and this idea of an all gender restroom and what does that look like? You heard this from some of the other speakers. Everybody should have access to changing stations. Everybody should have real high level of cleanliness, and that's gonna help women in particular. But it's also then really how we are studying some of the issues that impact women in particular. Really looking at our passenger journeys. What is it like for a family to use the system and thinking through every step of their journey, or what it might be like for a woman as a single business traveler, for instance, to be using the system. And then, of course, looking at a wide range of ages and needs, and really designing universal access throughout the entire system. Next. So, of course, the station designs and the train designs themselves are very important, but it's really important, especially when we're creating these new stations and a whole new rail system that did not exist, that we're thinking about the stations in their larger context and in the city. And so understanding what women need on that urban design level and that city level needs to inform this process too, right? And we know that access and choice is really important to women. We know that having healthy options and a healthy community is really important, and that having those strong community connections is really important. And bringing these things together is some of the things that women need from their cities. Next slide. So how does that begin to influence the way we're designing the stations? It really ties into that mobility, that creation of public space, how we're using the land use and the kinds of amenities that are provided in and around the stations. This is the Bakersfield station. In this case, the viaduct is quite high. It's about 60 feet up in the air. So we've created this sort of whole shaded space, which is a really important thing in the valley where it gets very, very hot for months on end. And so we're looking at that as sort of a pedestrian and bicycle passage, as well as a series of entry sequences into the station itself, where there's going to be amenities and provide, walkable and bikeable access to the station. When we're looking at the larger, we're reestablishing the grid. This area is all vacant and doesn't really have any interior streets. So we're reestablishing the grid in the area of the station. We're creating public plazas out in front. We're connecting a greenway system and trail to the river trail, which is sort of up at one end. You can kind of see that where the park is at the end. So really looking at all aspects of the station within that larger community. Next slide.
Apologies, trying to check it.
No problem.
Yes, here we go.
So the final thing I want to talk about is the fact that we're also harkening back to what I said about those sustainability goals. These stations are going to be so much more than just a place you come to get on and off the train. They are also resiliency hubs for the community. The entire system for high-speed rail will be electric. It will all be green power, and it will be locally generated. So as part of the build out of the system, we're building out PV fields all along the system, which will be feeding not only the track and train system, but will be feeding the stations themselves. This allows for a lot of resiliency. These stations should be able to operate even in times of crisis when maybe the grid goes down. California is subject to wildfires, earthquakes, tremendous heat stress in the valley in particular. So they can serve as cooling stations. They can refuge areas and provide power even in times when the larger systems may be down. And another important part of this is they can provide community connections and accesses to services in times of need. And one of the ways that the authority is really doing this, not only to help with this sort of community and long-term resiliency, but also in the immediate design of the station, if you go to the next slide, is really partnering with local community-based organizations. So recently we had a series of public engagement meetings with community organizations throughout the valley. We had one for every station that area that we're building. And we met with hundreds of CBOs and engaged them and really asked how do they see partnering with high-speed rail, and what are they really interested in bringing to their community and reflecting the needs that their community have. And so even before the stations are being built, we're doing what we call early partnerships. In the case of Fresno, we're building out a public plaza, restoring the historic station that was there, building out a multimodal hub with a lot of EV charging. But there's a whole series of partnerships from tree planting to food markets to murals. They're all being done with high-speed rail. And this is really building those partnerships with the community that's going to not only make successful stations, but it's going to bring that supportive services that are so, again, important to women, and hopefully will make people feel more comfortable using these stations and getting them used to coming to these spaces even well before the stations themselves are open. And I think with that, there's one more slide. I just wanted to wrap it up and say thank you. And if you want more information, here are some of the sources.
Thank you very much, Janet. And the last speaker in this panel is Hendrik Vanderkimpen. Thank you, Hendrik. Hendrik started his railway career in 1977. He carried out several operational functions as corporate executive in the passenger and the freight sectors, including being the Director General SNCP, head of corps of the Railway Police, and while being responsible for the security in the SNCP group. And since November 2023, Hendrik is the head of the corporate security service and stakeholders management at Eurostar. He is the liaison officer between Eurostar and the police forces, the Justice and Finance Department, and the Home Office. He's also a guest lecturer at the Law and Criminology faculty at the University of Leuven in Belgium. Hendrik is also vice president of Colpofer, special group of UIC, and a member of the UIC security platform. Hendrik, maybe I can leave the floor to you now.
I hope that you hear me. Thank you for your introduction.
Yes.
And very pleased to hear from our colleagues from the USA that the advice that we gave in 2011 to TSA for the construction of the high-speed line is now ongoing and is now practically ready. We met at the time Mr. John Pistole. I think that our colleagues are well known with him, former deputy director of the FBI. Thank you for this forum. I hope that I can. I heard already very interesting things today, very interesting approaches today, and maybe this my presentation will. I cannot go further by the slides. Can you do it? Yeah. Next.
Yes, of course.
I will start with the example of a very interesting study from India at the Anna University from September 2023, published by Rasmi Manian, concerning the impact of urban design in minimizing women's fear of crime. When we see the reports of India, of course the numbers are very high, but we can also consider that the numbers in a lower total numbering will be practically the same. 428,000 cases of crime against women in 2021, which is an increase of 15%, more than 50% versus 2020. And more than 10% of those cases were did occur in the 19 metropolitan cities. also, in which we see an increase of practically 23%. So I think I will come to the survey also, but people are asking for, and United Nations are asking for crime prevention, and we need to reduce the risk of crimes by implement the strategies and measure to seek the reduce of this risk of crime and the harmful effects on individuals and society, including fear of crime, because that is, of course, very subjective, by intervening to influence their multiple causes. Next slide, please. When we see the questioning of women in public spaces during different periods of the day, I think for us, number 4 is very important. 90% of women using public transport during night is feeling unsafe. 23% fairly safe, moderately safe. I can't very well understand what is moderately safe, but for me there is safe and not safe. But 26% are moderately safe, and then a small group of 8.6% feel safe during the night in public transport. The comparison between the city, the urban environment, and the public transport environment is very important. Next slide, please. When we continue on the study from India, we see that the types of crime are very specified versus women, and sexual assault is practically 50% of the cases in India, together with physical attack, theft, and chain snatching. It's clear that there is a serious problem around this in this environment. We also had a part of the study concerning what's now, what are the safe places? And when we look at that, we can see that good maintenance, monitored by the city, busy streets or social control, and well-illuminated spaces are considered to be safe spaces. Do we have to take, or do they take some precautionary measures? Yes, of course. And the most important are avoiding. That's not the best way to work with problems on criminality and on prevention, but to avoid some places, to avoid public spaces during night, and also avoid to travel alone, which is not correct for the environment of people traveling by public transport. Next slide, please. Concerning to the design, and I saw already in a lot of presentations before here that the environmental criminology has also been used to deal with the approaches of the railway systems and urban systems of public transport, to have CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, introduced into the approach of building of stations, environmental approach, etc., etc. Cousins, Professor Cousins is one of the people that are dealing with since 2008, I think since the 90s, of course, but in 2008 we had the first approach for public spaces, in which we can define the CPTED as the identifying conditions of the physical and social environment and that provide opportunities for criminality, and then the modification of those conditions in order to reduce the opportunities. And it's very important that we try to mitigate the possibility of increasing crime or conditions of physical assault, opportunities for criminality such as vandalism and theft, and that we use to mitigate this criminal facts together with the approaching the environmental aspects of buildings, stations, trains, and so on, as I saw on several approaches today. Next slide, please. We are now already at the first generation since the 70s, the second generation since the 90s. You kind of advance to the next slide. You will see that, no, can you come back, because there was a slide that we...
This one.
No, the other one.
This one.
This one, yeah. We started in the 70s with CPTED on the territoriality, the access control, supervision, a very hard way to deal with it. In the second generation of CPTED, there was already an aspect of community, an aspect of human scale, and so on, to come today. And then you can jump the next slide, because the next slide is also concerning the first generation. Yeah, you see the first generation: territoriality, natural surveillance, image and milieu, and access control. A lot of examples. I find a lot of examples in the Belgian railways. Maybe you can go on. For example, we have to define and limitate in time and space that the public spaces are clear for everyone. Everyone should know that they are in public space or in public environment. Everybody should know that the environment in which they are at that moment, for example, public space or public transport environment, that intruders can easily be identified. That's why in Belgium we have a free number for appealing on Securai, not for the police, but Securai, so that every time when there is a problem in civilities and so on, people can intervene as soon as possible. We need also that supervision, and the best practices, of course, are the presence and visibility of staff, CCTV and staff, women and men and other people should know that they can always be helped and always be seconded by security staff. Okay, next slide, please. You can click on it if you want to, because I think it's a sort of, yeah. For the access control, can you double click? Yeah, you see that the entrances of bike parks and car parks should be controlled so that they reduce the risk of criminal offenses. Here again, there is a clear distinction between public and private space. Maintenance, the fourth example of aspect of CPTED, first generation, that's of course that to tell everybody using the public space that the public space is being monitored. And for example, we use for that an art graffiti policy, not the policy that everybody can put graffiti on our walls and the stations, but we use very good artists to put on some art graffiti projects in a lot of stations in Belgium. Next slide, please. Supportive activities, of course, live performance in the stations, as we saw already in, I think it was Barcelona. Can you also click 2 times, please? Because the piano is there again. The piano is also now, at this moment, also in St. Pancras in London, and in some other stations, Brussels Midi Station. And that's a very large enrolled subject in approaching the environmental criminology. And also, and I saw the same examples in one of the first presentations this afternoon, as to study the wider embedding of station buildings in the environment, and also the accessibility of the stations into the urban space. Next slide.
Yeah, just be careful, Hendrik, because we have a limited time now.
Yeah.
I think there are a few slides left.
I will pause this one.
Thank you. This one.
Yeah, can pass. This one too. People can, the second generation, maybe that's important, because I heard also from our colleagues that the social cohesion is very important within a community, and public transport should also be considered a community in which people of different cultures, different background are coming together with different objectives, taking a train, taking a bus, but also coming to the shops and to the station, etc., etc. There also should be a community connectivity, which is very important. As we see, for example, the last example in 2024, with a big problem around and in the station of Brussels Midi, there was a collaboration between police forces, social forces, social environmental and organizations, and the railways together to approach the station, because we cannot do it ourselves. So we need this community connectivity. Next slide. The culture, of course, I will pass, and threshold capacity also. I will stop with the last slide then. This is the way that CPTED first and third generation from today, then the last slide. And there you see what especially going on in the first generation, the second generation, and the third generation. And there was something somebody told about trees and about green policy. I think that the third generation is focusing on green strategies, also on social innovation and sustainability. But the difference is that it also should be driven by the local communities, and not only by the railway enterprises or the infrastructure managers. It has to be supported by the local communities. And when we see the main components of CPTED now in 2024 is priority to surveillance and security, sustainability, livability, and also community participation. Voilà, that's it in a nutshell, because it's a large theory and a large, there are a lot of numbers of a lot of examples, but I cannot deal with it in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hendrik. Thank you for this very complete presentation. Apologies if we did not have time to go through every slide into details. And thank you for everyone who presented in this section. So I see that there were some questions asked on the chat, and the speakers started replying directly in the chat. So maybe since we do not have more time, and we have 2 more presentations which are very interesting as well, maybe we can do some kind of questions and responses in the chat. So do not hesitate to ask your questions in the chat, and then maybe the speakers can reply directly in the chat, or we can transfer the questions after the workshop to them. Thank you very much. And up next, we have Bronwen, Thornton, and Gonçal, Cerda, Beneito. So Bronwen is an international expert on walking and walkable communities, giving walking a voice on the international stage, and she's the CEO of Walk21. She works closely with agencies to address global challenges and ensure walking is part of the solutions, including the climate crisis, road safety, public health. She leads on the international conference series, and she's also the chair of the Africa Network for Walking and Cycling. And Gonçal is a PhD candidate at the LVMT laboratory at the Université Gustave Eiffel, which is the Parisian School of Urban Planning, and Paris Tech University. His doctoral research in urban planning and development turns around the daily mobility of single mothers in Paris region and weight of gender dynamics in their everyday lives. He also teaches at the Urban Planning School of Paris, and he previously studied geography, urban planning, and transportation and mobility. And now maybe I can leave you the floor, Bronwen.
Great, thanks very much. That's really good. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback if anyone is not on mute. I don't know, maybe it's just you, Maria, but anyway, that's a bit better. Great. Okay, hi everybody. I will try and be very quick because I think we're already over time. I just wanted to touch a little bit on some subjects that have come up already in the slides and in the presentations we've seen. And it's been really great to see some of the very detailed work and the very detailed thinking that has gone into gender inclusivity in stations and around stations. And particularly in the Los Angeles presentation, we see that the importance of those connections out into the community, those broader mobility and the access to the station, and how important that is. And it really tells me that, and it won't surprise you coming from Walk21, but historically, and from a perhaps more masculine perspective, we've always seen transport as a system and a technical solution. And it's really important that we see how we move in our mobility as a social solution. And I think we've seen that coming through in some of these conversations today, that it's this combination of these two things. So I'm going to talk really quickly about access to the railway stations, particularly from a walking perspective. And these women are in Milan, which I just love this picture because they look fantastic out enjoying the streets of Milan. Next slide, please. So the really important thing to understand about a public transport journey, a rail journey, is that actually how people access that public transport and how they depart from that public transport is part of that journey. And we've heard lots of that today about, you know, origin to destination, end to end, all of these things. People use last mile and all these different expressions. So we understand that people either walk or cycle to a station or a bus stop, and then they can walk between modes and they walk from those modes to access their destination. But what is really critical when you understand transport as a social phenomenon as well as a mechanical phenomenon is that when you ask people about the time they've spent, they can very often spend as much time walking as they do on the actual motorized vehicle as part of that journey. And when you ask them about their satisfaction, their experience of that public transport can be more informed by their walking to it and their access part of the journey rather than the experience on the actual vehicle as well. So it really repositions our thinking about how important these access modes are for the public transport and particularly for the rail. And at the stations, as we've seen, some fantastic descriptions of changes inside the trains, changes at the station. We need to make those changes on the street as well. Next slide is a really quick demonstration of the work that Washington Metro did, which identified that not only is improving walkability to stations good for all the reasons around walkability and health, but actually it increases your ridership. And they identified all their walkable catchments and did the math, which says that for every 10 houses that they connected to that station with walking routes, they got an additional 7 rides. per week onto the train. So that's a direct fiscal translation of connectivity by walking into the metro. And I put these 4 people with their hands in the air because they're celebrating the fact that they got one of their walkable shortcuts to their station and can access their train. But as we've heard, it's not just about the direct connection, it's also about the safety of that connection, and it's about the security of that connection, particularly for women, people with children, and the elderly. Next one, please. So I want to talk a little bit, we've heard a lot about women's experience. We've just done this fantastic project in Milan called Step Up. It's a really great little brochure and a great project. I'm really sorry I haven't put the web address there, but you can look it up online, understanding how women feel walking in Milan. And we've seen this already. Women are not happy to walk after dark, and they don't even go out. The numbers increase, as you can see in this chart. So women's and men's experiences in space is very different. And we see that it's really critical to address this to support our public transport and our rail, because the reason women choose Uber in cities is because they can go from inside where they are straight out the door and into that private Uber experience to actually get to their destination. And so this piece of the journey is critical for that. Thanks, Lucy, for putting the link. Next slide, please. And we don't need to say this, we've seen this, but I'm sharing it with a group of people because every now and then, even though you're around this topic for a while, someone says something which is really, really critical. And the change we've heard and seen in the gender conversation over these last few years is that by sharing our stories, we understand that this is a social problem that requires societal solutions, not just a personal problem about the way you dress. Next one, please. So a couple of pieces of examples of our work where we have been working on the walkable catchments to public transport stops to train stations that we are doing. The first one you can see here is in TU Dublin, and we've developed what we call our walkability app. And with the support of the Alston Foundation, and because in Ireland, women are motorising faster than anybody because the system just does not provide for their needs when we talk about trip chaining and things like that. And when we analysed the technical solution of their fantastic new Luas light rail, we discovered they're like, women are not riding the Luas. Why are they not riding the Luas? It's nothing to do with how beautiful the carriages are or even the destinations that the Luas goes. It's the surrounds of where the Luas drops them off, mid-block, inactive streets, high walls, discomfort for women, and discontent with the service. And so we use our app to go out and walk with women on their journeys to and from public transport, not just the immediate surrounds, but out from there for about 500 meters to do the full catchments, so that we can start imagining that the whole journey, not just the station and the train, is part of the conversation that we've had. And as a result of that, they're implementing some of these changes, but it's a great demonstration that the best technical solution doesn't always meet the social needs. And the other report we've just done, again, working with our walkability app, developing the walkability app is a satisfaction survey. So it's not a technical analysis of the environment, it's a how do you feel? And we've just done this in Cairo, looking at Old Town and New Town Cairo to see what those differences are and how different people experience the walking journey to their railway destination, their trains and railways. Next slide, please. And this shows you a little bit what the app does, which is you get to a point where you don't feel comfortable, you can choose what's making you uncomfortable. And you can see here we have a very simple traffic light system where our little walker on the left of your screen comes to a point where he's got a safe crossing and he's very happy. It's a green environment, or she is very happy. Then there's a bit of discomfort mid-block with this orange one, uncertainty about the speed or sense of belonging. And then at the red dot in the middle, you see a bit of angry driver behavior, which again is impacting. And the app actually captures the location, the time of day, the weather, and the point in the calendar year. So what we can do is walk with people, understand their walking journey to and from these public transport stations, from railway stations, bus stops around their community, and identify these clusters of concern. So it's not each individual spot, but where are we getting a lot of red dots? And it really shows up on the mapping where these points of best intervention. And someone said to me once, it's like you put acupuncture into the city. You don't have to do the entire street, but you do where these points of concern come up the most for people. And then we go out with the technical teams, share that with them, with the local authority, and look at what the best interventions are for making a change. Next slide, please. So this is a really quick summary of what the app does. I've mentioned most of those things, but the importance is that it's like a satisfaction survey from your walkers, but incorporating that catchment journey to the station. And it allows you to establish a baseline and then to go back and measure the impact and evaluate those improvements. We saw that in the chat earlier in this conversation, people asking, how do you know if it's worked? How do you know if it's made a difference? Do women feel better about it? This app can help you do that, because that's exactly what it's doing, not just measuring the environmental changes, but the impact on how women feel and how comfortable they are. Next slide, please. And that brings me to my final slide, which is to invite you to join us in Lisbon to continue talking about people, about public space, about gender, and about access to trains, rails, buses, the whole entire journey, and how walkability is part of that conversation. We're in Lisbon in October, but abstracts close next week. So please do join the conversation about making our cities more walkable, more connected, and more attractive for women to spend time on foot in public space. Thank you very much. You can go to the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bronwen. Gonçal, maybe I can leave the floor to you now.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Maria, and thank you for the invitation. Yeah, we have already listened a lot of things and a lot of ideas. And now I'm presenting a part of my PhD. So you can move, please, to the following slide. So maybe we can start with a long escalator. Some of you have already seen one of them. This one is from a central Paris railway station, but you can find it elsewhere, also in suburban stations. For some of you, it represents nothing. It could be the same also for a regular woman like in the slide, but she's a single mother living. If you can go to the next, please. Yeah, thank you. It's okay. So she's a single mother living in a big metropolis and working as an office assistant. So imagine her coming back from work with her bag and a working bag, because tomorrow she's going to work from home in order to bring her young son and to the psychomotor therapist and her daughter to her music lesson. She's also carrying some groceries because on the weekends she must drive her daughter to her soccer match, and it's harder and longer to shop with the youngest one. And now, even harder, imagine that she's traveling also with her both children because they have already finished school. Not that easy to take this escalator to move in the station, right? If you can pass, please. You may think this complex case is not very common. Nevertheless, single mothers led an important and growing number of households in urban areas, and the category materialized gender issues. In the Paris region, single-parent households are a quarter of households with children, and single mothers are the majority of single parents. There's a weak consideration of these households, even if they manage complex daily lives. Indeed, one of the main characteristics of single mothers is that they have to maintain economically the household, and at the same time, they have to carry out domestic work without the help of a partner. The previous research showed their daily mobility is more constrained by their children than that for parents in a couple, and that single mothers' mobility is more affected by care activities than for single fathers. However, little research has focused on both space and single motherhood in daily mobility with a focus on perceptions. My goal today is to present you some of the results of my research about single mothers' daily mobility to understand the complexity they face in their day-to-day lives. I'm going to quickly present you 3 axes of complexity and 1 strategy related to daily travel. It will help to bring some hypotheses about their needs and maybe some ideas during the discussion for a better design of stations and infrastructure. If you can change this. The results of this presentation are part of my PhD, where I combine quantitative and qualitative data. For the first, I did statistics with the latest Parisian household travel survey. It is a classical travel survey conducted in the whole Paris region that records socioeconomic data of households, individuals, and the information of all the trips in one day. And the qualitative survey is based on semi-structured interview. I conducted them with 31 single mothers of at least a child under 18 years old that were mainly under their responsibility and lived at their home most of the time. Mothers have between 1 and 3 kids, whose ages range from 1 to 21 years. They are all medium to low range employees, or their employment is somewhat precarious. As a result, their standard of living is pretty modest. And if you can change, please. And yes, my research is located in the Paris region, as I said, an urban area of 12 million of inhabitants. For those who are not familiar with Paris, the center is strongly densified, and there is a well-developed public transit network. And single mothers are overrepresented in dense and low-income areas, as you can see in the map. So if you can change. So with my results, the first axis of complexity is related to time. In a 24-hour day, we spend some of our time traveling for diverse activities, and it could be considered more or less complex. If we look at the average time parents spend traveling in a day, fathers travel the longest with low difference among them. However, there's a strong difference between single mothers and mothers in couple. The latter spend 20 minutes less traveling than the former. And if we focus on the travel time budget for the care and professional trips, we can find that other fathers spend more time traveling for professional activities than for care activities. Contrary-wise, all the mothers spend almost the same amount of time on care trips than on professional trips. I should note, and you maybe know, that generally the care activities are located around the home and the workplace is located further. That explains a lot of these results. And if you can change to the following slide, please, Maria. It is important also to note that single mothers spend the most time traveling for care activities. It could be interpreted as a sign of the constraints they face on their daily lives, related to these activities: children activities, grocery shopping, administrative chores. Change the slide, please. After time, let's see now the complexity in space. So single mothers have to take into account not only their own schedules, but also their children's. This implies a broadening of the range of places they have to go to during a day or a week. They should juggle between many different locations, chain trips, and that may imply that they alternate between modes of transport or manage diverse distances and travel conditions. For example, the amount of or the nature of the items they carry. During the trips, they face also problems related to the way they move and the objects they carry. and the poorly adapted infrastructure in the mobility spaces. Have a look to the quote from the interview with Jeanne. She says it's hard to move with her children by public rail transport, such as metros or suburban trains, because she needs to take the stroller for the youngest child and hold the oldest one's hand. So yes, she can ask for help, but she struggles because the other passengers may be in a hurry and it takes quite a long time to do it. It's an example, among others, that single mothers, like disabled people, find obstacles in public and mobility spaces. That's perceived as a reminder of the role of mothers and of the fact that they are not welcome in certain areas of the metropolis. Next slide, please. This example, the last example of complexity in space could be applied to other parents, of course, but remember that, as I said at the beginning, single mothers have to deal with these complex aspects of their daily lives, mostly on their own. That's what I saw in this third axis of complexity, the complexity in coordinating. They must coordinate different activities related to the role accumulation, child rearing, income generating, responsible for social life, etc., without any kind of support within the household. There is then an exacerbation of the effects of the constant presence of their children. As Elizabeth explains in the quote, her shopping time is constrained by the children's schedules. And also, she must be with her children all the time, even if it takes longer to move because the children are tired or ask for things. This complexity in coordination has direct consequences in mobility conditions. In addition, one of the direct consequences of this complexity in coordinating is a lack of free time to do things without their children. And next slide, please. Single mothers' daily mobility reflects a high level of complexity, but the mobility and particularly the places they travel by or through cars, train, buses, station, public spaces can be used in a strategic way in order to contribute to a successful articulation of activities and journeys. They optimize the time spent while traveling or waiting for a trip. For example, a mother said me that she read and wrote some personal emails in the metro to work, or that she can buy online items for the kids. The quote from Sabine's interview in the left part of the slide show how she optimized the dead times in her car, during whom going back and forth to the home would be more complicated. Her son has to go to the psychologist every week. She must drive him and stay with her daughter. So she helps her daughter with her homework while waiting the end of the psychologist session. Single mothers can use these times and spaces to find some personal spare time, which is rare in her daily lives. For example, Simone explains in the quote on the right that the mobility time is one of the few moments she can devote to herself to do or to listen what she wants. And then we can go to the next slide for the conclusion. So to sum up, the study of single mothers' daily mobility shows us that they face a high level of complexity related to the time, the spaces, and the coordination of activities with little free time. We can consider them as an archetype of constrained metropolitan lifestyles. If we do so, and the public policies and the design of spaces and infrastructure take this kind of archetypal profile into account more often, we will be able to move towards more inclusive spaces and mobilities. And if we focus on the topic of this workshop, how can rail station and design improve these situations? Okay, maybe the main policies should be implemented in other levels. However, thinking on a better and more inclusive design can improve something on single mothers' lives. Single moms spend the most time traveling for care and domestic activities. We have to design mobility spaces, such as a station, as the other presenters said, for these trips and not just for commuting, but also for care-related trips. The stations and infrastructure need to be prepared for people who need to move quickly because they are combining and chaining multiple activities, and also for people that travel with objects and loads that are difficult to move or with dependent people. We can also learn from their strategies and the uses they do of the mobility spaces in order to facilitate them. For example, the comfort and the quality of waiting spaces could have a good effect on the rare personal time. So it's then a necessity to understand an archetype of constraints metropolitan lifestyle to move towards more inclusive transport policies and spaces. Thank you for your attention. And thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Gonçal. Thank you. So just to have been, I wanted just to make it, to thank everyone who participated in this workshop, and especially everyone who presented in this workshop. I feel that the topic that we're talking about today, the gender responsive design for railway stations and infrastructure, is extremely important, and it's linked to multiple problematics, as we can saw in the presentations today. So we saw the importance of collecting related data in order to fix some KPIs or learn more about the stations or some other contexts, as we can saw from the Magdalena case with the ITF toolkit, choosing right design directions, as it was presented by Sharon and Angela, reuniting a whole panel of different actors, which is very important as well: local or regional authorities, railway infrastructure managers or train operators, police forces, as it was shown by different UIC members in the second part of this workshop. And finally, as it was shown in the third part of the workshop, the mobility for different categories of women, such, for example, as single mothers that we just heard now, and especially for women that choose walking instead of taking other transports like taxis, for example, interchange and transport, or just walking directly for the station, can be quite difficult. So thank you everyone again.